My name is Margaret Bennett, and for the longest time, I truly believed I was living a fairy tale. At 38, I was already a published author. My books lined the shelves of small independent shops in Manhattan, and, every now and then, I would catch a stranger reading one on the subway. I lived in a brownstone apartment that overlooked a narrow, tree-lined street in the West Village, the kind of place tourists photographed, the kind of home I once thought only existed in movies. I shared this life with my husband, Paul Bennett, a financial consultant. Paul wasn't just successful. He was charismatic in a way that made people lean closer whenever he spoke. His voice could melt away my stress in seconds. He had a way of saying my name, soft and slow, almost like a promise he renewed each day. Every morning began with a ritual. He would brew coffee exactly how I liked it. Dark roast, splash of oat milk, 2 teaspoons of sugar, and place the mug beside me with a kiss on my forehead. I used to think of it as his silent way of saying you matter to me. Every evening, without fail, ended with him whispering words that anchored me. You are my world. For years I believed him. I believed in us, until one night, everything changed. It was close to midnight when I stirred awake. The sheets beside me were cold, the space empty. At first I thought nothing of it. Paul often woke up restless, sometimes grabbing a late-night snack or double-checking work documents in his home office. I rolled over, expecting to drift back into sleep. But then I heard it. A voice. His voice. Low. Serious. Calculated. Not the warm tone I knew, but something darker. She still doesn't suspect anything, he said. I froze. My lungs felt locked, as though the air itself had thickened around me. My heart began pounding, loud and frantic, like a drum echoing inside my chest. I sat upright, straining to hear more. Everything's going as planned. Almost done. The words sliced through me like glass. On trembling feet, I slipped quietly into the hallway, pressing myself flat against the wall near his office door. A thin line of light escaped beneath the doorframe. His voice continued muffled, though I could not catch every detail. But I didn't need to. I had already heard enough. Panic surged through me. I crept back into bed, forcing myself to lie still, arranging my body as though I had never moved. Minutes later, Paul returned. His footsteps were calm, measured, practiced. He slid beneath the covers with that same effortless grace, pulling the blanket over us. If I hadn't overheard him, I would have believed nothing had happened at all. But that night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, my mind racing in jagged circles. I didn't know what he was planning. I only knew one thing with certainty. Paul was hiding something, and it involved me. The next morning, the world looked the same, but I didn't feel the same. I moved through the kitchen like a ghost, every motion deliberate, mechanical. Paul was still asleep upstairs, his breathing steady, as if his dreams were untouched by the secrets he kept. I stood in front of the coffee maker, hands trembling as I reached for my phone. Until that moment, I had never once questioned our finances. I thought that was what a good wife did, trust. Paul handled everything, bills, savings, investments, retirement planning. I had let him take full control, telling myself it was efficiency, partnership, love. But trust, I was learning, could be the first step toward losing everything. I opened our banking app, a simple action that felt suddenly monumental. My breath caught as the numbers loaded. Transaction after transaction flashed across the screen. $500 here. $1,000 there. $750, $2,000, $1,200, dozens of withdrawals scattered across the past 3 months. None enormous by themselves, but together they painted a pattern, and it wasn't pretty. It wasn't random. It wasn't careless spending. It was deliberate. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself, the phone slick in my sweaty palm. My mind spun with questions. Was he gambling? Was there another woman? Was he funding something darker, something dangerous? The sound of his voice behind me made my whole body jolt. Checking the account this early? I turned, trying to mask my panic. His tone was casual, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of surprise. He leaned lazily against the doorway, rubbing the back of his neck like a man caught off guard. "Just being curious," I said, forcing my voice to remain light. "Some of these charges look unfamiliar." He crossed the room without hesitation, poured himself a cup of coffee and smiled, a smile too polished, too rehearsed. "Oh, those? Just a few small investments. I must have forgotten to mention them." He sipped slowly, avoiding my gaze. Something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was colder than anger, sharper. I nodded as though accepting his explanation. But in that moment, I began to watch him differently, not as the man I loved, not as the partner I trusted, but as a stranger wearing my husband's face. That night, I noticed more. Subtle things, details that I had once overlooked. Paul was on his phone constantly, not just checking emails, but glued to it. Always turning the screen face down when I walked into the room, always stepping into the hallway to take calls, lowering his voice so I couldn't hear. And when I asked him gently, "What are you working on?" he would smile, that same disarming smile, and say, "Just business. Nothing for you to worry about." But I was worried. Deeply. Worry had begun to calcify into something else. Resolve. I couldn't ignore the gnawing voice inside me anymore. I wasn't going to sit still and wait for his plan to unravel. I needed answers. And soon. 2 days later, the chance appeared. It was a quiet evening. Paul had just finished dinner and announced he was going to take a shower. Normally, his phone was an extension of his hand. He carried it everywhere, even into the bathroom. But tonight, for the first time, he left it on the dining table. I stared at it, my pulse thrumming in my ears. 30 seconds passed. Then 60. Upstairs, I heard the rush of water. My hand moved before my brain could stop it. I reached for the phone, unlocked. The glow of the screen lit my face as I scrolled through his messages. Most threads looked harmless, work reminders, casual chats. But then one conversation stood out. No name. Just a number. My stomach tightened. The most recent text read, "Send her the Orion files. Just make sure she stays in the dark." "Almost done," I froze. My eyes scanned it again. And again. "Orion files? Make sure she stays in the dark." Her? Who was her? Me? Someone else? My blood ran cold. I placed the phone back exactly as I'd found it, every movement precise, careful not to leave a trace. Then I walked to the kitchen, splashed cold water on my face, and gripped the sink until my knuckles turned white. The water upstairs was still running. I had a few more minutes, but my thoughts were spiraling. Paul wasn't just lying. He wasn't just hiding money. He was planning something deliberate, and I was the target. Later that night, he slid into bed beside me. His lips brushed my forehead like always. "You okay?" he asked, voice soft, laced with concern. I forced a smile. "Just tired." Inside, I was screaming. He didn't know I had seen the message. He still believed I was in the dark. That was his mistake, and I intended to use it. The very next morning, as soon as he left for work, I dialed a number I hadn't used in months. Anne Marshall. Anne wasn't just my best friend from college. She was sharp, ambitious, one of those women who never lost a debate in law school. Today, she was a highly regarded estate attorney in the city. We had reconnected last summer over coffee, laughing about the old days. I never imagined I'd be calling her like this. When she picked up, her tone was warm but curious. "Margaret?" I didn't waste time. My voice shook as I poured everything out. Paul's late-night calls, the hidden transactions, the message about the Orion files. There was silence on the other end. Then Anne asked, her voice steady, "How much money are we talking?" I swallowed. My throat was dry. Close to 500 million. The line was quiet for a beat. Then Anne spoke, firm, clear, no hesitation. "Margaret, we need to move your assets. Now." My knees weakened. I sat on the edge of the couch, gripping the phone. "Are you sure?" I whispered. Yes, if you wait, he'll make his next move. We'll create a trust in your name, legally protected. He won't be able to touch a dime. Her confidence steadied me. I glanced around the apartment. The walls lined with my books, the framed photographs, the life we had built. My book royalties, the savings accounts, the brownstone itself. Everything I had worked for was at risk. But if I hesitated, it could all vanish. I'm in, I said finally. The next 72 hours blurred into a frenzy of documents, signatures, and urgent phone calls. Anne worked like a machine. She brought in her team, specialists who knew exactly how to seal cracks before anyone could exploit them. The apartment title was transferred into the trust. Investment accounts were locked down. Every asset, every thread of my life's work, shifted under my personal legal protection. By the time Paul walked through the door on the third evening, carrying takeout with his usual effortless charm, I had done what I never thought I'd have to do: protect myself from the man I once trusted with my life. Thought we'd have Thai tonight, he said cheerfully, holding up the bag. I smiled faintly, took it from his hand. Great idea. He had no idea. No idea that while he smiled and played the role of doting husband, the fortress was already built. The papers signed. The money moved. He could try whatever he wanted, but he would never touch my assets again. And I wasn't going to warn him. Let him believe I was still asleep. Let him make his move. Because this time, I was ready. 4 days later, Paul made his move. It was a Friday evening. He came home earlier than usual, dressed in one of his tailored charcoal suits. His tie was perfectly knotted, his hair slicked back with precision. He looked calm, almost smug, as though he'd been rehearsing for this moment. Without a word, he set his briefcase down and sat across from me at the dining table. His posture was straight, his face carefully composed. Then he slid a folder across the table toward me. "We need to talk," he said. I didn't flinch. My fingers moved slowly, deliberately, as I opened the folder. Inside were crisp, neatly stacked papers. Divorce papers. "I think it's for the best," Paul continued, his tone cool, rehearsed. "We've grown apart. I don't want things to become more painful." I looked up at him, keeping my expression neutral, my breathing steady. "Really?" I asked, my voice calm but edged. For the briefest moment, his composure cracked. A flicker of uncertainty flashed in his eyes. Then he nodded, forcing himself back into character. "Yes, it's better this way." I drew in a slow breath, then slid the folder back across the table toward him. My voice was even, deliberate. "Before we go any further, there's something you should know." His brows drew together. "What?" I leaned forward, my eyes fixed on his. "I've already moved everything." He blinked. His jaw twitched. "What?" "The apartment. The accounts. The royalties. All of it. It's in a protected trust now. You can't touch it." The color drained from his face. His hands clenched around the edge of the folder. What do you mean?" "I mean," I said, keeping my tone steady. "You don't get to walk in here, hand me divorce papers, and walk away with half of my life." His jaw tightened further, his knuckles white. "You can't do that." I met his glare without blinking. I already did. For a long, charged moment, silence filled the room. He stared at me, searching for weakness, for some crack he could exploit, but I gave him nothing. Finally, he pushed back from the table, rising slowly to his feet. His voice was cold, sharp. "We'll see each other in court." I stood as well, matching his height, my voice calm but firm. "Then go ahead. Try. He stormed out of the room, his footsteps echoing against the hardwood floor. And for the first time in weeks, I exhaled. Not in relief, but in power. Because now he knew I wasn't the woman he could manipulate anymore. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. 3 days later, I noticed something strange at work. Whispers, side glances. Colleagues who normally greeted me with warmth suddenly avoided eye contact. Their voices dropped when I walked past. It wasn't paranoia. It was too consistent, too deliberate. Then, my assistant Sophie walked into my office, her face pale, hands trembling slightly as she held a printout. "I think you need to see this." I took the sheet from her, and my stomach dropped. It was a screenshot from an anonymous online forum. A post titled, "CFO Hides Funds During Divorce Using Company Money." Beneath the headline was a paragraph accusing an unnamed executive of embezzling corporate funds to shield assets during a divorce. The language was vague, but in the comments, someone had spelled it out. "I know who it is. Margaret Whitman. Look into her." The blood drained from my face. Paul. It had to be Paul. "He's trying to ruin me," I whispered. Sophie nodded solemnly. "If this spreads, it could damage your reputation." Maybe worse. I stood pacing my office. My heart pounded in my chest. Years of work, my name, my credibility, everything I had built brick by brick, could crumble because of one carefully planted lie. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands. I need to call Anne. That evening, I sat across from Anne in her office, the city lights glowing through the window behind her. She listened intently as I explained everything. The whispers, the post, the accusations. My voice wavered, a mix of fear and fury. "This isn't just personal anymore," I said, gripping the edge of her desk. "He's trying to destroy me professionally." Anne leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers, her eyes sharp. "He's playing dirty. He's trying to force you into a settlement by smearing your name. He wants to scare you into giving up." I held her gaze, my voice low but firm. "I'm not backing down." She nodded, her expression hardening. "Then neither am I. First step, a cease and desist. If he pushes further, we'll sue for defamation and reputational harm." A small spark of hope flickered inside me. He thought he could bury me under lies, but he had underestimated one thing. I wasn't afraid of the truth, and I wasn't going anywhere. Just when I thought I had seen every one of Paul's tricks, he found a way to sink lower. 3 days later, Anne called me into her office. Her voice on the phone had been clipped, urgent. When I arrived, she didn't waste time. "He just filed a lawsuit," she said, sliding a document across her desk. My heart sank. "What?" "He's accusing you of financial fraud," Anne explained. "He claims you illegally moved marital assets. He's alleging you embezzled funds from your joint accounts." I slumped into the chair opposite her, shock coursing through me. "He can't be serious." "Oh, he's serious," Anne said grimly. "And there's more." She pushed another folder toward me. "He didn't file alone. He filed with a co-plaintiff." I opened the folder, and the name hit me like a punch. Moretti. The same name from the text message on Paul's phone. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Anne folded her arms, her expression dark. "A known fraudster, connected to multiple cases involving forged documents, money laundering, shady offshore accounts. No convictions yet, but a long trail of suspicion." I flipped through the papers. My hands shook as I skimmed the so-called evidence, page after page of numbers, signatures, fabricated transactions. Some even mimicked my handwriting. "These aren't mine," I said, my voice rising. "These are forgeries, lies." Anne nodded firmly. "I know, but we have to prove it." And fast. Fear burned into anger. All the terror, all the sleepless nights. It condensed into a single, unbreakable flame. "He's trying to bury me in lies again," I said. My jaw clenched. Anne's eyes narrowed, her determination matching mine. "Then we'll make sure those lies collapse on top of him." She handed the file over to a forensic finance expert, one of the best in the field. For the next week, we worked around the clock, gathering transaction records, tracing digital footprints, verifying every single move I had made in the past year. I barely slept. Coffee became my fuel, adrenaline my companion. Every page I turned, every discrepancy we uncovered pushed me forward. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about my name, my integrity, my right to exist without being crushed under someone else's deceit. By the end of the week, we had it all. Ironclad evidence. The expert traced the false documents directly back to Moretti's firm. The dates didn't align. The signatures had subtle but undeniable flaws. And most importantly, none of those fake transactions connected to my real accounts. Paul had thrown everything he had at me. But the truth was stronger, and the truth was mine. A month later, we walked into court. The courthouse smelled faintly of varnished wood and old paper. The air was heavy with anticipation. I wore navy, clean, sharp, deliberate, my shoulders squared, my steps steady. Anne walked beside me, calm and composed, radiating quiet authority. Across the room, Paul sat at the plaintiff's table. But he wasn't the man I had once loved. Not anymore. His face was tight, his jaw twitchy, his hands restless on the desk. He looked like a shadow, brittle and angry, trying to hold himself together. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. Anne laid out our evidence piece by piece. Every bank record, every verified signature, every traced digital trail. The forensic expert testified, breaking down how the documents had been forged, step by step. Paul's case began to crumble, and when the judge called for Moretti to testify, he never showed. His absence spoke louder than any argument could. The judge reviewed everything carefully. The courtroom felt suspended in silence. My pulse echoed in my ears. Then came the ruling. The court dismissed Paul's claims. He was denied access to my trust, denied the assets he had tried to steal, and instead of winning, he was ordered to cover my legal fees. Relief didn't wash over me in a rush. It settled slowly, like the weight of a storm finally lifting. After the hearing, Paul tried to approach me in the hallway. His voice was low, almost pleading. "You didn't have to do this," he said. I stopped, met his eyes, and for the first time I wasn't afraid. "No, Paul," I said evenly. "You didn't have to do this." Then I turned and walked away. For good. In the weeks that followed, I began piecing my life back together. Slowly, carefully. I returned to writing, letting the words heal me, line by line. I took long walks in Central Park, breathing in the crisp air, watching families laugh, couples stroll, children chase after pigeons. I let the ordinary moments remind me that life could still be simple, still be beautiful. I didn't celebrate, not in the way people might imagine. I didn't throw a party or toast with champagne. Instead, I reflected, because victory doesn't always feel like joy. Sometimes it feels like quiet, like peace after a storm. Sometimes it's just the absence of fear. Through all of this, I learned something. Something every woman should carry close. Trust is a gift, but control over your life is a right. No matter how loving someone seems, never hand over your power blindly. Know your worth, protect your future, be willing to act before it's too late. And if someone ever tries to break you with betrayal, stand. Stand tall and let the truth speak louder than revenge. If this story moved you, hit the like button, share it with someone who needs strength today, and subscribe for more gripping stories every week. Don't forget to tap the bell so you never miss an update.